Good evening, everyone. Thanks so much for joining in for the Random House Big Ideas Night devoted to what I consider to be parenting in captivity. I'm Marnie Cochran. I'm executive editor here at Random House Publishing Group, and I'll be moderating our discussion for the next hour or so if we last that long. I'm also the mother of two, so I'll be listening to our four amazing author panelists with an ear to my own parenting concerns. Those panelists are Lisa Damour, author of Under Pressure most recently, Cara Natterson, author of Decoding Boys, Judith Warner, author of And Then They Stopped Talking to Me, and Kristen Howerton, author of the memorably titled and the winner of the title award, Rage Against the Minivan. Authors, in a moment, I'll be asking each of you to give us a thumbnail description of your book so that listeners can get a sense of your area of focus. But first, just a bit of tech housekeeping. As you in this enormous, as I understand it, audience know or may know, Zoom's chat capability enables you to make comments and ask questions as we talk, and we very much encourage you to do that. Because I think there may be more than 400 people here tonight, more than that have signed up, but we'll see how many log in. Your questions and comments will go to one of the producers of the event and be forwarded to me, and I will get them as emails. So if I'm looking this way, I'm looking at your question, and I'll hope we will get to it, and I'll pose it to the person you want me to pose it to. So if we could just go around the four great authors and give us a little thumbnail sketch. Lisa, I want to go first?
Sure. Hi. Thanks to everyone for joining us tonight, and for your flexibility and creativity in this way of being together. I'm Lisa Damour. I'm a clinical psychologist, and most recently the author of a book titled Under Pressure, Confronting the Epidemic of Stress and Anxiety in Girls. My work, as in my long-form work, tends to focus on girls and young women, though I hear often that 80% of everything I write also applies to boys, which I think may be usually true. I still practice as a psychologist, and I do a lot of consulting and speaking, and I write the monthly adolescence column for the New York Times, so that's where I write co-ed stuff all the time. Mm-hmm. And I'm the mother of two daughters. I have a 9-year-old daughter and a 16-year-old daughter, so I straddle two very different developmental stages as a parent. And so I am living at this moment very much parenting under COVID-19 conditions.
Yeah. Thank you. Cara Natterson, Dr. Natterson.
Hi, I'm Cara Natterson from Los Angeles. And I am here at my house with my 14-year-old son and my 16-year-old daughter on the other side of the house. Right now doing the same social distance parenting that Lisa and everyone else is doing. I'm a pediatrician and left practice about 10 years ago to pivot to writing and consulting, and have really focused on puberty and puberty-related issues. I've written a bunch of books for kids about their body development. And my most recent book is Decoding Boys, which is the subtitle is New Science Behind the Subtle Art of Raising Sons. I'm thrilled to be here in this very new venue, the Zoom venue, to talk about the intersection of the parenting piece and the medical piece in terms of coronavirus and COVID.
Super helpful. Yeah. And Judith, I'm going around on the tiles on my screen. So Judith, you're next.
Hi, I'm Judy Warner. I am a longtime journalist and author living in Washington, D.C. with my two daughters who are now just 20 and almost 23, my husband, and our two dogs, who I hope you won't hear during this event. This is my first virtual event, and so I hope you'll all bear with me if I'm a little bit awkward with it. I'm very aware of hearing my family walking around upstairs, and I just hope the rest of you aren't hearing them too. And I'm excited to talk about this book, which really grew out of my experience of being a middle school parent and finding it just so hard, and wanting to understand why I found it so hard, why it was so hard to find a way to talk about it or even ask questions about it, and why there was so little good information out there of the kind that I was really looking for. Basically, when I couldn't find the information that I needed, I decided to go and try to find it for myself. And that led to a really, really fascinating research journey with more than 100 great interviews and probably the most interesting reading I've done for any of my books. So I'm excited to share that.
Great. And Kristen, can you introduce yourself?
Hey guys,
Yes.
I'm Kristen Howerton. I live in Southern California. My background is actually in marriage and family therapy, and I did that for about a decade. And then I attempted to start a family, had a rocky start there, and had several years of infertility, which I talk about in my book. And then ended up adopting my first child. And then I had a child through pregnancy, and then another, and then I adopted again. So I have 4 kids, 2 adopted and 2 biological. I started blogging really as an outlet. I never had an idea that I would write a book. I just started a blog because I was at home and felt like I was kind of losing my mind. I think like a lot of people, I felt like I was a really great mom before I had kids. And then when I had them, I felt really unstable and unsure of myself. And it was quite an adjustment for me, to say the least. So I started blogging, kind of using sarcasm as a coping skill and telling funny stories about my kids and finding connection with other people online who, you know, maybe felt the same way, that while we love our kids so much, parenting was really, you know, challenging and different and difficult. And ultimately, that's really what my book is about. It's about that journey of learning to let myself off the hook for some of the expectations that I put on myself and that other people put on me about what being a good mom means, and then kind of figuring out how to be a good enough mom and how to opt out of the things that felt like they were making me crazy and that weren't allowing me to be present with my kids, but then opting into the things that that I actually care about and that kids actually need from us, with a few stories about, you know, embarrassing things along the way.
Well, that actually is a great place for us to start, because you raise an issue that I think everybody in this audience and the people on this panel may be probably feeling, I know I am, and that is this amplification of either perfect or crazy hectic family life that we're seeing on social media, and comparing, meaning, being funny, you know, TikToks, talking dogs. God, I love the talking dogs. But the scope that people are seeing of families, the good, bad, and the ugly. Do you feel? Do any of you feel that we're under more pressure to be perfect on social media at this crazy time, or is this a sort of a real refreshing time to let our hair down? What are you seeing if you're looking over your kids' shoulders, or if you're on social media yourselves?
Well, I can say I've spent a lot of time in the past couple of weeks on Facebook groups for parents of middle schoolers, for example. And I've been really struck by the incredible raw honesty that people are just sharing their problems. They're not sugarcoating them, and they're asking for help. They're, you know, allowing themselves to ask for help and not holding up any pretense of any sort of perfection or any sense of sort of how they're supposed to be. And the fact that they're asking for help means that people are giving it. It creates an entirely different spirit than what I remember when my kids were that age, which is now a little while ago, 10 years ago. And I think I almost wonder if there has been a generational shift in a direction of being able to be more real and more imperfect. And if these incredibly stressful situations that we find ourselves in right now, these crazy situations, are allowing that to come to the fore even more in what's turning out to be potentially a very productive way.
That's interesting. Yeah.
I'll pick up on that. I'm so glad you said that, Judy. What I love about the books by the women who are on this panel with me is that they all take up the reality that parenting is hard and development is bumpy. Mm-hmm. And this to me feels like a fresh way to talk about parenting, fresh within the last 10 to 20 years. It's also how we used to talk about parenting. There used to be a much more honest discourse. And by used to, I mean in the 70s, 80s, you know, that was sort of understood and talked about. And then I know what you're talking about, like something in the 90s and early 2000s shifted to this sense of like, oh, if you just do this, this, and if you just say these right magic words, and if you just have these right projects or activities, this is going to be fun and awesome, and your kid's going to do what you say, and you're going to have a good time with them most of the time. And that, of course, is a bill of goods, right? I mean, that parenting is great, but mostly a lot of work and tedious, right? I mean, it's all of that together. And so, Judy, I love the way you bring that up, that idea of like, now we can just all tell the truth, right? And that that this is really hard, and we're together all the time. And like, my kid's really annoying me right now, and I want to do this all the time, and I really miss my car. Like, it's like, my husband and I was like, aren't you kind of missing the buffer of just being in the car by yourself? Like, it's nice to like go home from work, go down the floor and like be home. But I'm like, oh, I missed that in between. So I'm just so delighted that, what you say, like that this could be a moment where we just really pull that veil back and just talk about the challenges of living at home with children.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, the other piece of it is that even though we're all writers in this parenting space, we all fully recognize that we're making this up as we go along, right? I mean, our job as writers in this space is to bring as much data as we can to the making it up part, and bring as many anecdotes and try to crowdsource what is the best way. But boy, we have never really experienced a moment where we're really making it up in real time. And that's the experience that I'm hearing about from so many families, is that, you know, all the circumstances have shifted. For some families, it's that they're all in the house together all the time. And is that perfect? Is that hard? Is that some combination? And then there's this other very large group of families where they're not all together. Maybe someone hasn't come home, or maybe someone is on the front lines working, or maybe someone is sick and has to be isolated within the home. And what does that look like? And how are you supposed to isolate a sick person inside a house? And so all of it, we're making up all of it. And it challenges our sense of what it is to be a parent. And at least in my house, it challenges my kids' sense of what it is to be a kid. And I think in largely very good ways.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, I know a lot of us have tweens or teens, and one of the things that's been so fascinating for me in this is, you know, developmentally, my kids are at that age where they are pulling away. You know, they want to be with their peers more than they want to be with me. My influence is minuscule. It's all about, what do my friends think? What are they doing? Where are they going? And it's just been such an interesting, like, whoa, like that, you know, that all just got pushed aside, and it's super intense connection at home during a time when developmentally they should be pulling away. And, you know, trying to figure that out of like, how do we make this a healthy time, but still give them that autonomy that they need? There's so many losses in this season for so many kids. But there is this sort of interesting, like, beauty in having this connection with my teenagers right now who wouldn't be interested otherwise, you know?
To your point too, forgive me, Martha Stewart, but as you were talking, Lisa, it occurred to me that maybe we were all under the influence of this sort of get it perfect tablescape of parenting for a couple of decades there. And now we get to wear our PJs and have frizzy hair on camera, and we're going to maybe take this giant leap forward again, back to the future, whatever that is, to be less complicated and to maybe hover over our children and, as I think one of you said earlier, curate their childhoods less and let them, at least in this short term, explore what's of interest to them in their room or their house or their basement, wherever you allow them to roam, as opposed to mandating certain activities that might have been good for a transcript or an application later on. I think that's a healthy thing. I hope it continues as a trend. Realistic, I think that we'll probably taper off a bit, but I think I'd be interested if you all felt medically, psychologically, in terms of connectivity, if that's a healthy phenomenon that I'm seeing.
Cara, you want to start?
Yeah.
Cara, sorry, Cara.
Okay, I'll start. Medically, 100%. I mean, it's. I think what you're seeing is what I'm hearing about from all sorts of people. It's this sort of less curation, and there's a reversion to something that's much more genuine. And there's a lot more time for a lot of people, and so kids are starting to figure out what engages them and what they're really interested in, and they're doing that because, frankly, this is a generation that's never been bored, and they're kind of bored, which is great. We've been talking about this forever in pediatrics, like let them be bored, right? And okay, so this is not how I saw it going down, by the way. This was not the plan for instituting mass boredom, but I think that's part of it. And I will also say, before tossing to Lisa, Kristen, when you were talking about this sort of kids who are developmentally at a stage where they are trying to individuate and get away from us. You know, I wrote a whole book about how boys shut their doors when their testosterone starts to rise. And I am seeing in my own home, and I'm hearing from so many people that, yeah, they still shut their door. Don't get me wrong. They still shut their door. But they come out and they talk and they engage a lot more. And it has really made me rethink how much is the biology of it and the developmental piece, and how much is what we've created, which is a very full life for our kids outside of our home. And our home, it's hard to have a very full life outside and then to come home and have a very full life inside. And I think that shutting of the door and that need for downtime is something that we have interpreted in one way, at least in pediatrics, we have interpreted it in one way, and maybe there's a new way of looking at it now, because they are engaging with us a little differently. Some are engaging with us a little differently, not all.
I'm curious to see how we all go back. In Under Pressure, my most recent book, I talk about the ratcheting up that has occurred around academic expectations and extracurricular expectations. I mean, and like, you know, and of course I'm talking about a privileged, ambitious subset of kids and families. But in that crew, you know, just how intense the college process has become, how demanding. And as I've watched my 16-year-old daughter, her stress just drain out of her, and then watch the APs. I mean, it's fascinating to watch what happens when the AP test changes now and is now a 45-minute online event. And I keep saying to myself, oh, is this the moment? You know that old, that analogy of the frog in the water where it gets turned up degree by degree by degree? Like, did the water just go cold and everybody say, no, wait a minute, like, what was that frog doing in that hot water? You know, so I think we're sort of getting a glimpse of it. That said, I kind of have a feeling that we're going to find ourselves back in that hot water. I think that once everyone can go back to the way we were doing it before, I think a lot of us will go back to doing it the way we were doing it before. And so we should think it through. And one of the things that I've observed in terms of like, how should we be doing it right this minute? You know, should you be trying to squeeze in an extra language, or should you be trying to make sure your kids are reading extra right now? I feel really agnostic about this. I feel like there's a million ways to get it right in families, and every family does what works for their culture. That said, I feel like some of the throwing everything into high gear and the Martha Stewarting of this moment, I can't, as a psychologist, look at that without thinking that's a defense against helplessness. Like, we are all in this like giant helplessness moment, which is really uncomfortable. And I would say of all the emotions, shame and helplessness are the least bearable for people. This is a helplessness bonanza. And so when I've heard some stories, and I've heard them around, of parents insisting that the curriculum for the kindergartner be much more rigorous than what's being provided online, you know, like those stories, or sadistic teachers, like, we can do extra now, they don't have to commute, you know. Right. Part of me is like, man, you do not sit well with helplessness, do you? So,
but it's a good question about how we will emerge from this, Lisa, and Judy and Kristen jump into. Do you think there are things that we should be doing to when we get the green light to transition back into some previous sense of our pace and our routines? Are there pieces of this we should try to hang on to? Are there pieces of this new dynamic? Are there parts of it that we should jettison as fast as we can? Is there anything? I mean, I think there are, as we pointed out, there are healthy things happening. People getting to know themselves well or better is the top of my list. But is there, one person did actually ask, and I saw this question come through on the chat, that what are some things you can recommend that would help us transition back and maintain the communication we've established, or reconnect with the kids who we've left in their room for a month?
I think of this as kind of a privileged pause, at least for families who are privileged enough not to be dealing with life and death issues right now, with extreme illness, with a terrible loss of income, you know, who can see some kind of silver lining to this, which again is a privilege just to be able to in the first place. And I think that parents have a really big role to play in how they frame this for their kids. Is there a focus on what's lost? You know, is it treated as some kind of tragedy to be doing less? Again, I'm looking at middle schoolers, pre-algebra or algebra, and less soccer practice and not getting to go to the 7th grade dance. Or do you emphasize the good things that are happening and reinforce for kids the successes that they're having at home? And remember to express the positive things and what you're proud of them for in the little things that they're doing day to day. Because if there are good things coming out, and I think I'm hearing certainly that there are a lot of good things coming out for kids right now because they're reconnecting to themselves more. They're able to focus in on their own interests and do things at their own speed. They're also getting more sleep, which is making a big difference globally. That those things can carry over if they're reinforced, at least in spirit, even though obviously life is going to go back to how it was before. And we don't want it to turn into another way for us to beat ourselves up. Like when you come back from vacation, you know, convinced that you're going to carry that feeling forward and bring all the good things into your everyday life, and then things go back and you feel that much worse about yourself. We have to, I think, be vigilant to not let ourselves do that either.
Mm-hmm. That's good advice. Anybody else want to chime in there before we switch gears?
I'll pick up on the privilege piece.
Okay.
So one of the things that is weighing very, very heavily on me right now are all of the inequities that were always in the structure of our society and now are thrown into incredibly high relief. That if you are poor, which of course intersects in a lot of communities with race, the experience of this pandemic, the data are horrifying. I mean, like really horrifying in terms of the risks, the social determinants of health, and then, the questions about economics and all of that. And I think this is a moment, to pick up on what Judy said, to sort of help kids appreciate really how big these disparities are, right? If they have the luxury, I mean, truly the luxury of being able to kind of enjoy this, which I would not deny any child if they can enjoy it. I think it's a moment when we can start to introduce, look, if these are the cracks that are always there, look what happens when a giant pressure falls on these cracks, which is not to say that we thrust it upon our kids to go right now, try to figure out how to handle these inequities and, make this a much more fair universe. I mean, that's a very hard thing to put on a kid. But one thing I actually would like to think that when we return, that we then take these cracks so much more seriously than we did before. I think that we can I live in Shaker Heights, it's a suburb of Cleveland, and I think I can live near poverty and around poverty, and it's not in my face in the way it is now. And I think I'm thinking a lot and trying to, in gentle ways, invite my kids to think a lot about the poverty to which we're accustomed and the incredible detriment that arrives for others when the stresses across the board get so big. And I would like to use this moment to help sensitize my kids that these are not bearable circumstances under any condition, and then they're thrown into high relief under these conditions.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Can I pick up on that for a second? Because I think we actually have a responsibility as parents to not only for us to make the shift, but to hear our kids when they see what is happening in the world. I mean, not the little kids, the preschoolers and kindergartners are, they're blissfully unaware for the most part, and that's appropriate. But when you're looking at older grade school kids, certainly middle schoolers and high schoolers, they're very aware of what is happening. If they get BuzzFeed News on their phone, they're reading about coronavirus, right? There's this crazy blending of information streams, and they are hearing and they understand, and they're hearing it at a time where many of them are developmentally starting to grapple with issues of mortality. They are, they're impulsive and risk-seeking and thrill-seeking, and they're doing all these things, and yet they're also filled with a very rational sense of fear and now I think deep compassion for other people, and a deep understanding of what the drivers of sort of this pandemic and all the downstream consequences are. So there are the fixed drivers that already existed, poverty and all of the inequities and all the economic inequities. And there's this bucket there. And then there's this piece where the virus doesn't discriminate. Although your care when you get the virus certainly is different based upon what your resources are. But the virus itself does not discriminate. The virus, it does like older people. It doesn't really impact kids as much, which has been an issue in terms of getting kids on board. But I think they're on board now. I think they understand. I think they feel a strong sense of social responsibility, all of them, regardless of what their background is. And so I think it's on us as parents to not revert to life as it was before. I think it's on us as parents to listen to what our kids are saying and to engage them in these conversations and to empower them to make changes and to do things in order to level the playing field a little bit. Everyone's supposed to wear a mask. Everyone needs to have a mask. If our kids have the ability to make a mask, they should give a mask to a child who doesn't have the ability. There is an opportunity for some degree of equalization that our kids are going to come to us individually and they're going to say, how can we be a part of this? And I think the biggest parenting mistake we can make is if we do revert to what life was like 6 weeks ago or 8 weeks ago. I think it is incumbent upon us to help our kids kind of take the step they're looking to take naturally. And that means bridging this divide. And I hope our medical system shifts dramatically as a result of this. And I think we're going to see much more telemedicine, which will give people much more access to doctors. I think we're going to see much more free care. I think people are not going to be willing to go back. They're going to say what we've been talking about, what we should have been doing, we're doing now, and we're keeping it. But I think as parents, we should, I'll get off my soapbox now, but I think we should harness it and we should do it for, this is, Gen Z is, we have told them they have to change the world, and they have said to us, yeah, you start and then we'll pick it up. So that's our job.
Cara, we just got one question actually about the medical, how we should talk to a younger demographic, maybe 5 to 10, about what's happening in the world. How much information do you feel they need to have, or what's the way to boil it down in a way that will really resonate for them? The other question we're getting a lot of is, what about for parents who have this is different entirely, so take it up afterwards, but 2 working parents and a number of kids, maybe Kristen like you, 4, with differing needs, different age range, different schools perhaps with different rules, sort of the chaos in the house, sharing Wi-Fi, and that people are asking for tips about for parents in that kind of a chaotic situation, which describes some of us, but more of these questions are coming from people with more kids, and I think younger kids. So start with medical.
Single parents or parents where the kids are going back and forth between 2 homes. I mean, they're
yes.
Right. But I'll take the first, and then I'll pass off for that second one. What I've been advising in terms of how you talk to kids is I would generally put kids in 3 large buckets, with the giant asterisk that your child best. So you're going to know how to talk to your child in a way that's going to work for that kid. And if you have multiple children in your house, they're all different. And even at the same age, they all responded differently. So take this with a giant grain of salt. But there are three general buckets. They're the really little kids. I would put those as the preschoolers up to about kindergarten. There are the teenagers, middle schoolers a little bit, and teenagers. And then there's this in-between group, right? Which is sort of the second, third, fourth, all the way through the end of middle school group. Okay, so the little kids, it's like the sex question. Where did I come from? Okay. You're not going to answer that question in great detail when it's being asked by a 4-year-old. So likewise, with coronavirus, you're going to give them what they need, which is some version of, listen, you know how when you go to school and one child is sick and then you get it and you don't feel so great and you stay home and you get better and you heal? Yeah, well, that's a virus that causes that. And now there's this new virus and it's going around our community. It's actually going around the whole world. It's incredible. It's brand new. And everyone's staying home from school. That's just how we're handling it to protect each other. That's enough for a 4-year-old. They don't need to know anything more than that. So you got and lots of variations on this theme, right? But okay, so that's your young. Your old, your high schoolers and your engaged middle schoolers, give them a lot. Give them as much as they will take. Educate them. Let them read about the virus. Let them understand what RNA is. Let them understand, why are you supposed to wash your hands for 20 seconds? Because you need the soap to surround the virus and you need to be able to rinse it away with all the other oils. You know, do the whole thing. Send them articles, text them articles, print articles and leave them out in the house. Do whatever you can to engage them in conversations around real information, because they deserve it and they want it, and they will take that real information and they will then become proactive and start protecting other people. Because remember, they don't think that they can get sick with it. Only about 2% of hospitalized patients are under the age of 18. So there's some mixed messages coming. So give them information and let them understand. It's the middle group. It's Judith's group on down, right? That's the harder spot, because it's really going to depend upon the child, where they are developmentally, intellectually. Do they have older siblings who are telling them more? Do they have younger siblings who don't need to know? Are you communicators in your house? Do you guys talk about things, or are you not so much on the communication? So that's the big gray zone. And I think for those kids, you have to tailor it really specifically. But when you're not sure what your kid wants to know, a great question to ask is, if they pose something to you, you can respond by saying, hey, that's a great question. Let me understand more. Or what made you think of that? Or what are you worried about? Because they may ask a question about coronavirus and they want to know about the 20 seconds of hand washing, not the death rate, right? So you have to find out where they are in order to meet them where they are. And maybe, Judy, you want to take it from there with the middle schoolers.
I just think with the middle schoolers, where, you know, very often what parents worry about so much is the social stuff and what's going on socially, what's going on online, and all the sort of vicissitudes of what we think of and what often is a really mean age. And, you know, building on what Lisa and you were talking about earlier in terms of inequality and social justice, it all comes down to empathy at root. You know, the things that parents worry about and see with middle schoolers and the nastiness up close comes from lack of empathy. And what we're seeing on a society-wide level also comes from lack of empathy. And we have a really great opportunity now in everything that we're facing to be able to model it and teach it, and all of the things that kids can do. You know, it's true, they can't remake the world, but they can make masks, they can write cards to elderly people who are isolated in nursing homes, and every action they take puts empathy into action, and I think will stay with them and will carry over afterwards. And I think just in terms of what we say to them in any moment, obviously it has to do with who the kid is and what your family is like, and we just have to remember to keep that kind of empathy and compassion at the center.
That's great advice.
Well, I'll take the other question you asked, which was, I mean, I think basically, how are we pulling this off, right? Like, how are we doing this when we have lots of kids at home, when all of it seems undoable? And I will say this, you know, it's hard when there does seem to be sometimes like this narrative of this time as being like the great pause, or people being bored, or, you know, quarantine and chill, when that is true for some people, that totally depends on probably the job that they walked into this in. But for some of us, this is a very stressful time. It's a stressful time because there's financial insecurity for many of us, all kinds of industries. It's a stressful time because probably most of us never anticipated homeschooling our children while maybe trying to work from home. And there's a lot of upheaval. And I will say that for me personally, there's been a ton of upheaval for me. And I'll say this, you know, speaking for several writers in the room, you know, many of us are coming up to what were supposed to be times of a book launch. And instead of doing a book tour, now we're pivoting and trying to figure out, you know, how are our books going to sell, things like that. But I have 4 kids. They are all home out of school for the rest of the year. I work full-time from home, and I'm a single mom. And so I have not found myself bored yet. I haven't read a book. My life looks like I was up till 3 last night working and trying to finish my work, because my kids need me during the day for school, because we have IEPs and we have diagnoses, and, you know, my kids are not able to do school without a lot of help. Mm-hmm. And that's me now. So I'm saying that again, I've said this so many times in my own social media. This is not the hardship Olympics. Everyone is going to be having their own unique hard in this. But I'm speaking my heart just really to make people feel less alone, if that is where you're finding yourself, that many of us don't feel like this is a lovely moment of respite. It feels totally crazy and chaotic. And if that is where you're at, I think, and I'm saying this knowing I need to do it for myself, we've just got to give ourselves grace and give our kids grace. If a schedule works for you because that makes you feel like you have some control in the chaos, do a schedule. If a schedule makes you feel stressed out, don't do a schedule. If you feel good getting things done throughout the day, or organizing the spice drawer, or taking on a home project, do that. If that makes you feel stressed out, don't do that. I think that each of us has to take our own unique needs, the needs of our kids, but also our personalities and what our own coping skills are. And my coping skills are going to look totally different than another person's coping skills. And then when we see somebody else coping differently, we then don't have to decide, well, then I should take up crocheting. I think that we all have to set a super low bar for ourselves right now. We are not homeschooling. Yeah. We are trying to help our kids in the middle of a pandemic. And most of us are not working from home. We're trying to work in the middle of a pandemic. And if we can kind of shift our narrative on that a little bit and recognize that we're not going to be homeschooling at capacity, we're not going to be working from home at capacity, nothing's going to happen at capacity, and then just really let it all be okay, and really let ourselves off the hook. I think that is kind of Kristen, the only way to do this.
Kristen, somebody on the comments just said, preach, Kristen, preach. And somebody else said, super low bar for the win. Thank you, Kristen.
That's the only way.
There is another question, a theme coming out of these questions, which is helping kids who are grieving what they're being asked to sit out of this spring, whether that's a prom or a graduation or a birthday or whatever it is. I have a daughter who's graduating in a month if they have a graduation, and she's also grieving the expectation that what was supposed to be sort of a last season of these friendships that have been around for a long time are going to necessarily dissipate a bit, spread out a bit next year, and that had to start early. And that's been a very difficult thing to watch her cope with. These are small things in the scheme of other big losses and economic hardship and illness for sure. But I think a lot of people on this chat are experiencing some level of that grief around the house for those lost moments, and are looking for advice about helping kids through that and onto the other side of it.
I have a lot of thoughts on that one. So if we start to think about what what good can come from this? You know, so I love just the conversation about like, look, we're all actually taking measures to be more socially responsible right now than we have been before. I mean, you know, at governor's orders, you know, that you stay home to protect your community, but like to roll that into like, hey, we should be socially responsible all the time, and we should be inconveniencing ourselves in the name of caring for those around us all the time. Like if we can keep that message going, that would be fantastic. Here's another one though, and it's on the emotional side. So in the first chapter of Under Pressure, I actually make a case for how healthy and normal stress and anxiety are. That we have always in psychology embraced anxiety as a normal and healthy function and stress as a normal and healthy function, both of which can cross the line into being pathological, but they are part of the human experience and a normal, healthy, protective, growth-giving part of the human experience. And so I feel like I've been out on this bandwagon. Sometimes I feel like, and I love the idea of well-being, sometimes I feel like it's me versus the wellness industry, like this sales idea that like you're supposed to feel great all the time. So I've been like banging this drum on the stress and anxiety side. I am now banging the drum on, and you should feel sad, and it's okay to feel helpless, and it is okay to feel deeply distressed and scared. And so I have felt this to be an amazing opportunity to talk with young people about them having the right feeling at the right time, being evidence of their mental health, not them feeling great all the time as evidence of their mental health. So I am like, you're sad, you should be sad. This stinks, right? You're having the right reaction. You're having evidence of mental health with this, you know, deeply sad reaction. Because there's two things going on at once. One is that they are having painful feelings and deserve empathy. The other is there has been way too much messaging in the culture that you're not supposed to feel bad.
Right.
And so this is a giant opportunity for us to just acknowledge and help them sit with emotional discomfort. And what this does, and this is going to be a strange place to take this creates freedom. Because if you operate with the parameters that I can't be in any situation that might make me uncomfortable, you are severely limited in what you can put yourself into. So I don't feel Pollyanna-ish about this at all. I am pretty interested to watch a whole bunch of young people see how much they can bear with loving support from the grown-ups around them. This, I think, has the potential, and we've seen this in the data before, to make them stronger, braver, to recalibrate their yardstick for what constitutes a crisis or something they cannot handle.
That's for sure, yes.
So I would say pathway to revisiting questions of social responsibility and social justice, and pathway to freedom by way of high tolerance for negative emotion.
Does that include, this is a question that just came through, I'm experiencing this too, circadian rhythms, the sleeping all day and the staying up all night. Is this too a coping mechanism for this difficult stuff we're going through? Should we high five them as that's a great strategy for getting through this? Because I need to know that personally, but so does somebody on the chat.
Yeah, okay, I'll take that one. But I will say to the point Lisa was just making, I actually think it's one of the reasons boys are starting to come out of their shells and out of their rooms a little bit more, is that a lot of times in the tween and teen years when boys just go behind their shut doors, parents approach them and say, what's wrong? And I feel like we're in this moment where you don't ask that question because we all kind of know the starting point of what's wrong. Like everything's wrong right now. So by taking that question off the table, we're all sitting with this discomfort a little bit more openly. And it's not just what's wrong with you. It's sort of, oh, okay, let's accept it. So it's kind of interesting. Circadian rhythm, let's do that.
Just quickly, can they sleep all day and get up all night and still be healthy? No. Okay.
No.
But they can sleep more. That they can sleep.
They can, and they are. You know, we have this huge movement of like later start time to school. Let me tell you what the later start time to school looked like in my house. It was, I wake up at 8:20 and I log on at 8:30, and they were getting an hour more of, we're on spring break right now. So we're in that sort of holding pattern at the moment, but the first 2 weeks of online learning really we saw much more, and this was, I think across the country, parents have been reporting this. There's extra sleeping had. But the corollary to that, that's really important advice. I'm sure there are questions coming through on the thread about screen time and how much screen time and how do you liberalize it in the moment. As a pediatrician, I cannot let this conversation go without saying, we still think that you should have devices live outside the bedroom. Even though they're in English class in their bedroom, which is a little weird, and I get it, and it's the circumstances of there isn't enough space in the house and people have to go find their space. If that's what you need to do, that's what you need to do. But the cell phone or the iPad or the extra downtime on the computer, when that's not during school hours, we know it's interrupting sleep patterns. We know the kids who are staying up all night or being social with their friends. We get it. We want to give them a little bit more flexibility, but they need to sleep and their melatonin needs to start to rise. And the only way it starts to rise to make them feel sleepy is if their devices are off and their blue light is down. So I strongly encourage parents that while you're liberalizing screen time, and we can have that conversation if you want to have that conversation because it's interesting, please don't liberalize it so much that you leave all devices in the room and you sort of throw all the bedtime routines out the window, because that's not the goal and that's not healthy for you. And if you get sick, there's very clear data that connects your immune system's ability to fight infection with the amount of sleep you get and sort of your biological resilience. So let's not throw that one sort of out the window entirely.
You know, I can testify to what you're saying personally. I've never been a big social media person until COVID-19, and now I am addicted to Twitter and find that I'm on it before bed instead of reading a book, as I always have done. I cannot sleep. My brain is just sort of whirring and racing, and of course it's true for kids. I was hoping to come back to what Lisa was talking about in terms of distress toleration, because I think it's such an important point. It's one that's really hard to understand, and it's one that's hard to put into practice using the right tone, because you get a ton of pushback on that from Generation Z, which is all about the opposite, at least in sort of the rhetoric that comes out of them and that's reinforced among them. And I think also a lot of us in our own parenting style, we're kind of rebelling against the more, I don't know, ascetic parenting of our parents who had a more kind of, you know, just buck up and get on with it, you know, put a little lipstick on and you'll be fine kind of thing, right? Which we experience as invalidating. And that's how, I mean, I wrote about this a lot in Perfect Madness. We became so sort of emotionally enmeshed with our kids. And it's particularly a huge issue for middle school parents who have to be able to accompany their kids on all their social ups and downs without going down with them. So how do you teach distress toleration in a way that comes across as supportive and hearing and validating without it, you know, coming across as essentially shutting down what someone's going through?
I have two words. I have my two fallback words: stinks and handle. So when a kid tells me something like, oh man, that stinks, right? And like somehow that word just does the work. And then I pause and I'm like, can you handle it? And you know, there's variations on that. But for me, those feel both like, you know, yes, you have every right to be as hurt and troubled and upset.
Disappointed
and
ask it as opposed to telling.
It's a range of what you think you can handle. And I don't say manage, you know, or withstand. I mean, like really, like, can you be in charge of this even while quite disliking it? That's my shortcut.
Those are good words.
Yeah.
They were. Kristen, what do you think?
Well, you know, I think some of this circles back to what we were talking about earlier in terms of kids finally having kind of space. No one can be overscheduled right now. And I think a lot of the intolerance around distress and discomfort for our kids' generation is because we've not given them space and time to think or feel or process their feelings. And kids are getting that time right now, which I think is really amazing. And then we're getting the time to sit and talk with them. And I think, I really think space and time to process and feel our feelings is huge. Now, if they're spending all of this time on their screens, they're also not going to get that time to process their feelings either. So I think, you know, just making sure that we're taking that time, whether that be my family, we've created a new tradition where after dinner we sit around the table for a few minutes. We do these like table topic questions. And then it usually ends up with us just talking with each other, but just finding that space, you know, making sure that there are those moments. I mean, again, we're all probably going to use the video babysitter of the screens during some of this to get our work done, but finding the moments where we are connected and talking and doing that, you know, just basic stuff, the active listening, the how, you know, how was your day? How are you feeling today? And then giving them the time to talk and process through it. I think that's huge.
Definitely. We are getting close to the end of our hour. I think we could go on for another one. I do see a couple of repeat questions about helping kids for whom this crisis is a mental health trigger. If they've been dealing with something all along and coping pretty well, or have been getting help, getting therapy, and that's been interrupted now, can we give those parents some advice about keeping things on an even keel in that house? This includes also questions from people who are sharing custody of kids, and those kids are having to toggle back and forth. Should they still be toggling back and forth in an age where they should be socially distant, or, you know, there should be a tighter group of trusted, healthy family? Throw that out to you as perhaps our last set of questions.
Let me start off with the mental health question. So one thing that I really want to get out there is that if your child was meeting with somebody or needs to meet with somebody, it's not off the table right now. All the states are moving at a different pace, but I've been kind of tracking this through the American Psychological Association. It used to be a specialized license to do telehealth as a mental health clinician. In many states, they're like, all bets are off, do whatever you need to take care of people. So I am not licensed for telehealth. I am taking care of all of my own patients online. And insurance companies are being expected to cover this. Medicaid now covers this. So like, this is a great time to meet with a clinician if your state has caught up to this, and if, you know, quickly states are. So people should not assume that they have to wait until they can leave their homes to get mental health care for themselves or their kids. And just, it may in fact be more convenient than it has been at other times.
One person said, this is great. It's been easy to get appointments.
So that's one. And the other is, if we think big scale mental health, and this is where I'm going to turn the rest over to this brilliant, but this is the last thing I want to say, big scale mental health for parents and kids. Kristen brought up the term coping. And I think that for me, that's what this all boils down to. That when I look at the back end of this as a psychologist, and I think like, what are people going to look like in 6 weeks, 8 weeks, or however long this goes on? It will all come down to how they coped with this. And there's positive coping and negative coping. I want people to be using the positive coping. So here's negative coping. Negative coping is emotional withdrawal, cutting people off. Negative coping is turning to substances to blunt emotional discomfort. Negative coping is junk habits, right? Tech in the bedroom all night, eating crummy, sedentary behavior, you know, those things. Negative coping is taking it out on other people when you're upset. Positive coping, and this gets to what Kristen said, everybody gets to choose what works for them, right? What works for you is highly personal, but here's your categories of positive coping: emotional support, emotional contact, using distractions if you're upset, right? And instead of taking the edge off with extra wine, take the edge off with Tiger King or whatever you use. Positive habits, self-care out the wazoo, great sleep, eating well, exercising, like those things are huge. And then taking care of other people. We take care of others, we feel better. And so negative coping habits, they work in the short term, they are really destructive down the line. Positive coping habits, they work in the short term, they are really helpful down the line. For me, like, all of it falls away, it comes down to this one thing. As a psychologist, that's what I care about.
Right. Yeah.
And maybe I'll just pick up on the physical piece, the germ family, as we call it. Which is, so in this moment, your germ family represents the people who live under your same roof with whom you are swapping germs, and with whom actually you want to use those positive coping skills, right? And so if you are going back and forth between two homes, you could consider those two homes your germ family. But from the medical standpoint, we really do need for people to not exchange infection with people outside of their germ family. So what that means is if you're in a family where there are two homes and a child is going back and forth and a parent is going out, in and out of one home, or someone else is coming in and out of another home, suddenly that germ family is not limited to just those two homes that child is going back and forth between. That germ family has now been expanded and includes all the people that the parent who's leaving the house is coming into contact with. And that potential coronavirus is now being passed over to the second home, where maybe someone is coming into that second home and picking up the coronavirus. So the logistics of managing different family dynamics and how different families are structured is tough. This is tough. And every parent is going to need to work this out for themselves. But I would encourage parents to please view it as trying to keep the germ family as tight as possible, because that's our social responsibility right now. That's the only way this works. And so that's a big ask when there are kids involved, logistics involved, and lots of different people with lots of different needs. But do your best from that standpoint.
But that's a really succinct and resonating way to put it. I'm going to, even with my 20-year-old, calling it our germ family is going to work. It's going to help. It's really, thank you. That one's
not a phrase that I cannot remember where I heard it, so I can't footnote accurately.
We will give credit when we figure out where it's due. That's fine. Great. Any parting shots for our, I don't know, hundreds of listeners and people who are tuned in? Do any of you have anything last to say before we sign off at 9 o'clock?
Wash your hands, stay home, wear masks. Thank you.
There's lots of ways to get this right mentally. There's not one right way.
Mm-hmm.
And I think, the last question started with a question about mental health issues. For all of the things we've talked about and all the things you're reading about and hearing, again, if you're dealing with kids with mental health issues, it's that much harder. It's that much more complicated, and cut yourself that much more slack and do the best you can.
Low bar for the win. Let's do that. Thank you, everybody, so much for your time tonight and for joining us. We'll have to do this again. Clearly, we've just scratched the surface of all the concerns and all the issues and all the joys and funny things that are happening in our weird, closed homes these days. So thanks again, everybody. And yeah, we'll do it again soon.
Thank you all.
Thank you.